I'd like to take you a little bit of a different route, if you don't mind, because you spoke a few moments ago about general laws versus special laws. And in our Texas Constitution, we have in Article 3, Section 56, it says prohibited local and special laws. The legislature shall not, except as otherwise provided in this Constitution, pass any local or special law authorizing granting divorce. Is unilateral no-fault divorce a special law? Does it fit into this? And could you explain what the concept of special law is?
Sure. Well, we kind of touched on it or alluded to it a little previously, but a special law is essentially, traditionally, historically, has been a special law passed by the legislature to apply only to certain individuals, so it would be Jeff Morgan or Matt Johnston, it would have our names attached to it. But the principle and the function is still there to this day with unilateral no-fault divorce, because essentially this constitutional provision that, again, is a state constitutional provision, and it's not just in Texas, it's in over 30 state constitutions. And essentially the equivalence to that is the Equal Protection Clause. But this actually specifies divorce, that there should be general laws, not special laws granting divorces. And what does that mean? Well, general law means objective and special law means subjective. And so, again, it gets back to our idea of, do we have, are we doing case-by-case issue here? Again, no reason or any reason. So any reason, like, we're going to look at each case and, give you a divorce based on every single unique situation that exists. And so, again, no longer is it this objective criteria, these, general standards that we have in a society, state by state. But all of a sudden now, again, we're doing it based on someone's feelings. I feel like I want to get a divorce. And so, that essentially tears the whole system down. So in conclusion with that, the Equal Protection Clause applies, but the state constitutional provisions provide the same thing in a very more concrete and specific way, specific to divorce. And basically, it's similar to a takings clause. Basically, it says the laws cannot provide public benefit for private interests. So what is happening with divorce? Well, the government, the state, the public, the government is providing someone, what they want, based on their own interest rather than the interests of the whole state. Anyway, so without going too much into that, it's basically what we've been talking about, and it's no coincidence that these constitutional provisions and protections have been put in these state governments, because divorce has always been an issue in this country, and people saw the problem with subjective divorce, the legislative divorces historically, and so they moved away from that. And now we've moved back to that, and in a different form, but the same principle applies.
So when you look at the issue of the unilateral divorce, going back to your mother, for example, here she had a cause to file for separation or for divorce, but and therefore, if it's an action that has been taken against her, an offense, usually should be some type of remedy to that. Divorce may be part of the remedy, but I mean, you had a marital estate, and she basically got robbed of part of the marital estate. The idea, because, the way that I understand it, your father was able to file for no fault and then just move on. And oftentimes the people that use no fault divorce are abusive in other areas too. They have attorneys behind them. They have a lot of legal shenanigans there. And the person who is the victim gets re-victimized, and also gets re-victimized by the state. And the reason I'm going to say this is because in many instances you find a person who's had divorce filed against him, for example. The majority of no-fault divorces, factual nature, are filed by women and against a man. And many of the no-fault divorces, whether it's by women or man, the other person doesn't even want the divorce. But the person who files always wins without exception, 100% of the time.
It has to do with expediency, because the court want this as least painful for them as possible and least complicated. And what I think someone posted in the group chat here that it's all about money. I mean, if you have money, if you're a family that has wealth, okay, your divorce could take years, despite it being your fault. It could take years because they're going to suck you dry. If you don't have money, it could be over in a month, because no fault divorce is not the issue. The issue, well, I mean, it is the issue, but that just makes it expedient. And they're able to regulate how quickly or how slowly the divorce is going to take based on how much they can get out of you.
Right, but let me take it again, because whatever that one person said in the chat, the re-victimization of the victim, the person who thought, hey, I got married, I did not want to get a 5-year marriage. If I wanted a 5-year marriage, we could have had a temporary marriage. But the state of Texas won't give anybody temporary marriages. We can say, you know what, we're going to have a term marriage with the renewable. After every 3 years, we can renew the contract if we want to. We don't have those things. When we enter into marriage, the intent of both parties is that it's going to be for life. It's not going to be for a temporary shack up sort of thing. And so you have a person who gets divorce filed against him or her, and then ends up losing everyday access to his or her children. And what I look at is this, if you're going to leave the marital estate, you should not get to plunder it on the way out. And when you have a marital union, a marital estate, what is entailed in that marital estate? You've got wealth that you've created together. You've got a house that you've purchased together. You have children. And part of being a parent, whether it's a father or mother, you want to have that daily interaction with your children. They need it. We all need it. And but a victim here often is the person who ends up losing access on an everyday basis, or at least often 75% of the time, has to pay the other person, compensate the person who's leaving the marriage for no reason, for whatever, has to compensate him or her, has to pay child support, gets devastated, ruined financially, often has children alienated from him or her, because the child who spends more time with one parent, often that's the perspective he or she adheres to. So you have for example, you can have a very good father or good mother that no longer has access all the time to their children. And yet, if they remarry, they have access to the other children on a daily basis. So you have another thing with a child saying, wait a minute, that's my father, that's my mother. How come this lady's children get to spend more time with my father than I do? It creates a lot of problems, but again, it victimizes the children. It victimizes the person who has to keep on paying and paying and paying. In our Texas Family Code, it says that the judges are supposed to make an order in such a way as to maximize Title IV defunding. That's why there has to be a child support order that is given, and often it's the person who is the victim who gets re-victimized by the state. And if that person does not come up and pay money, that person can be even incarcerated over some of these things. So that's one of the issues with the no-fault divorce, is that it often re-victimizes the victim. Exactly. And there, again, no exception to the person who files winning.
Exactly. It's a foregone conclusion. As soon as someone files for no-fault divorce, that's what you're going to get, whether you like it or not, whether it takes a week or whether it takes 5 years. That's the outcome, because it's been predetermined by the no-fault statute. And like you said, you're going, the spouse is going to be re-victimized by going through this unwanted divorce to begin with, and then having to often pay the other spouse for child support and other things of that sort. The redistribution of wealth, which again, read Family Origins by Karl Marx and right. Lenin and those folks, Alexandra Kollontai, Frederick Engels. They talk about this stuff. It's they view the family structure as a bourgeoisie structure, which the capitalists can exploit the labor, all this kind of stuff that we went through in the Soviet Union, we're experiencing here in the States. And like you said, there's no neutral territory, there's no neutral zone. As soon as the courts get involved, they're either an institution dispensing justice or they're an institution dispensing injustice. And that's what we're seeing now, is that the courts are not neutral, they're not fair. They want things to be as expedient as possible, and if you buck the system, then you're going to be the one that's penalized. If you're also a traditionalist, if you're religious, if you hold to traditional moral values, they will also penalize you under the guise of discretionary power or equitable distribution, things of that sort. Like you said, statistically speaking, yes, women are far more likely to file for divorce than men. However, if you're a woman and you're a traditional, you homeschool, you stay at home, these kind of things, you will be penalized just as much, because right. The court system, in addition to already being corrupt and money hungry, they also detest and despise traditional values.
Right, right. And, you know, I thought your point that you said at the court gets to dispense justice or injustice. And what I would say with these family courts is that more often than not, they dispense injustice. And in fact, I wrote a resolution. It's actually in support of what's already on our platform. But, you know, unilateral no-fault divorce violates the United States Constitution in several places, violates the Texas Constitution. It's inconsistent with the Texas Family Code. And
the system is so embedded and so corrupt that even if you have the correct legal arguments, like you said, constitutionally speaking, someone can make a very sound argument. However, there also is now the politicization of the courts, the activist judges who don't want this system to be toppled. And it's very easy to do because it's a systemic problem. As I said before, the no-fault statute targets viewpoint. It doesn't target objective behavior. And so based on that alone, it should be deemed declared unconstitutional. So why hasn't this happened? You know, there are a lot of people who don't know, you know, that they can do this or that they can make these arguments, but you know, it's a lot of the problem is the family law section, the bar association, these lobbyist groups, self-declared lobbyist groups, and the judges themselves who, you know, would prefer to again take this expedient route versus, you know, upholding the Constitution.